Get started with this meeting of April 13th, 2021. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order concerning imposition on strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, meetings in the town of Upton are being conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. Tonight we have public comment, meeting minutes, a poll hearing, a notice from the Girl Scouts of Mendon, and then some board discussion items relating to a BVT liquor license, surplus equipment, the ARP, American Rescue Plan funding, changes to the town warrant and the town meeting warrant, and then the just internal board meeting dates, and then town manager updates. So with that, I will open the floor to any public comment. All right, next up we have the meeting minutes from March 16th and March 30th. I don't know, Steve and or Maureen, if you've had a chance to review those.
I have had a chance to review them. I think they're fine.
Yes, I read them over. They look good to me. The only thing I did notice is the warrant article is written at $2,100, and in our discussion on the 16th, it is a request for $2,000. So I can't exactly remember at our meeting. The $2,000 sounds correct, but there is that discrepancy of $100. Certainly not a big deal. I believe the minutes are right.
I can answer that if you'd like me to. Yeah, so CPC held their public hearing, I believe it was last week, and they, Rena Richard, the chair of CPC, sent me a notice, and the CPC has approved $2,100 versus the original $2,000 request. So that's why there's been a change in the draft warrant.
Okay, so our meeting minutes are correct, so I'm fine with that.
Then I will make a motion to approve the March 16th and March 30th meeting minutes as written. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
I second the motion. Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Next up, we have a poll hearing. Is National Grid on the phone?
Yes, Al Galvin, design engineer out of the Hopedale office.
Yep, and also this is Bob Moran. I'm the community manager, and although I've worked with Derek and Sandra and the fire and police chiefs, I haven't met many of you, so I just thought I would sit in and support Al if he had any questions, and make sure you know that I'm your contact if you have any questions for National Grid. Sandra knows, so we've been in touch many times. So,
Robert, that's
really Al's show. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's nice. It's nice to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Conley, I work for TSC, but we do consulting for National Grid Engineering Designs. I'm here as well.
Okay, so with that, these are polls. You want to walk us through where the polls are, and should I start, Sandy, by reading the legal meeting notice? I know it says, let's see, what 7:05, we're at 7:06, so we're okay now. Okay. I'll just read the legal notice before we get started. Please be advised the Board of Selectmen will be reviewing the petition of National Grid. The following are the public ways or parts of ways along which the poles above referenced may be erected, and the number of poles which may be erected thereon under this order. Hartford Ave North. Relocate poles P1, P2, P3, and P4. Relocate JO poles on Hartford Ave North, beginning at a point approximately 35 feet north of the center line of the intersection of Main Street and Hartford Ave North, and continuing approximately 450 feet in the northeast direction on April 13th, 2021 at 7:05 p.m. Obviously, this is a virtual meeting. So with that, I will hand it over to Al.
Okay, yeah, this is phase 2 of a Mass DOT project to to move several poles on these multiple streets. It looks like there's a total of about 25 poles involved. They're replacing and moving anywhere between 2 feet and 10 feet, it looks like, to help widen the street where necessary, allow for a better traffic flow, allow for a better opportunity to move or operate around parking lots or driveway or side streets, I should say. They've also, in order to do these relocations, had to also replace several anchors and guy wires. All easements seem to have been obtained from any private property owners that it affects, and some other pieces of equipment along the way have been also replaced and upgraded as well.
Very good. Any questions, Steve or Maureen? Concerns?
No questions from me.
Just a couple of quick questions. Do you have a schedule of when the work will be performed? And the second part of the question would just be, will we lose that travel lane? Is that going to be, disruptive to the commuter traffic? Do you know?
Schedule-wise, the engineers generally aren't a part of that. That's the customer fulfillment department works with the resource coordinators to schedule these jobs. I don't know, Bob, if you've heard anything as far as time frame goes.
No, I haven't. And you're correct, Al. It works through the design process and all the permitting. And once we get the final okay and get the the right-of-way certificate through the state, then it would move into scheduling. And I'll make a commitment to stay in close contact with Town Hall on the timing. And obviously there'll be traffic management that we would consider, and it may happen that we end up closing a lane, but if we were to do that, we would certainly coordinate with police and fire to make sure that town's aware and part of that. But I don't know specifics of it, but as I say, we'll stay in touch and commit to keeping the town informed.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Robert.
Sure.
One related note, and we can absolutely take this offline because I don't know that it necessarily directly relates to this poll hearing, other than this might be a good location for us to have this conversation. There are several communities in the area that have polls that are set up either independently or used for other purposes and shared for this purpose, which is to put a banner or some kind of advertisement. And I think that, I know there's one on Church Street in Northbridge. I'm not sure, Steve or Maureen, if we've talked about this in the past, but I know that there's been an appetite for trying to set something like that in Upton for several years, as I've talked with different organizations. What's the process, if that's something that's even possible? What would be the process for pursuing something like that, whether it's as a part of these poll relocations or just as an aside?
Yeah, so I can take that. In general, we don't allow attachments pole to pole. Pole to pole obviously would put stresses and strains on that, and becomes an issue with perhaps wind loading. You put a sign up there, it becomes a sail. It adds a lot of physics to the way the pole works. So pole to pole is out, and I am aware of other towns, you mentioned Northbridge, that have put their own poles within the public way, which they can do, and attach freely. I think one side is to a building and the other is to a pole, for example. So if they can do that kind of an attachment without involving, National Grid or Verizon or the other parties that are attached, that's one thing. But we do have a policy for allowing certain smaller attachments to be mounted, and I can make that policy available to Derek and Sandra and get it back to you.
Yeah, those are like the little banners or flags that go in. I've certainly seen those. Okay, so that's good to know that if we wanted to do that, it would really be something that would be independent of the utility companies. So that's we can take that offline. But I appreciate the perspective and information because that.
Yeah, well, I don't mean to suggest that it's completely independent because there are criteria for the size of the items to be put up and the method that you attach them. You know, you can't drill into the poles, for example. They're supposed to have spring-loaded things that allow for the banners to, you know, track with the wind, if you will. So, so there's a set of criteria for it, and I'll get you that.
Perfect. Even if they're not connected to, so what I guess I'm not talking about the attachment banners, like that, just sort of the smaller ones that you guys allow. I'm talking about if we put up our own poles to put a banner across the roadway. Do you guys have requirements for that, or just approval to work in the right of way?
I think that would, it sounds like you're suggesting doing it independent and not attached to any of the utilities. That would be on you, but there could be an issue with clearances. You know, if you're up that high, you could potentially be in you know, the electric space, and you need to have OSHA qualified workers in that space and maintain clearances. But you know, as long as you were mindful of that, and it didn't connect to the poles, I don't think we would have an issue. But if you did want to attach to the poles, it does involve National Grid and Verizon. You have to get approval through Verizon too.
Yeah, and I know we've got an organization in town that's been going through that. Steve, Maureen, just a quick pulse check again, not to go too far off on this tangent, but is that something that you guys are even remotely interested in pursuing or talking about, or should we just table it? Not tonight, but just in general.
Well, I would agree to having like certain flag, like on 4th of July, I know they attach small American flags to different poles down the main street. And I think I would be inclined to do something like that. The banners, I don't know. I mean, that's quite an expense if you're going to do a private pole to do it. Like he said, you have to have OSHA requirements and everything.
Okay.
Yeah, that's tricky. I know what you're talking about, Brett. There's usually when it's across the main street in Northbridge, I believe it's actually the Armenian Church Bazaar that they have that usually demonstrated every August. I do know I see that hanging. And then in different towns, even over in Mendon, there's some smaller banners that are hanging on the side, but those I think are on regular utility poles. So it sounds like it's definitely worth inquiring, but it sounds like it may be an awful lot of work, maybe something that we're not really, I don't want to say that we're not capable of doing it. I just want to say that it may be, I don't want to say that we want to bite off more than we can chew. I guess that's a way to say it. Because it sounds like some of these poles now are going to be joint-owned poles versus just Verizon-owned or Mass Power poles. So it sounds like we may get an awful lot of red tape just trying to achieve what would seem to be a pretty simple and you know, nice gesture towards the community, but it may turn out to be a lot of work. But sure, I would like to ask a few more questions.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, Stephen. So I would offer that our concern is, of course, safety. You know, anytime you get people up in the air, anytime you get them near energized conductors, and they may be volunteers, and you know, it's a wonderful initiative and effort, but we don't want anybody to get hurt, and it does happen. So that's the overriding concern.
I certainly appreciate everyone's indulgence, so thank you very much. With that, I'll take a motion on the polls. I certainly don't have any questions.
I would move that on Hartford Ave North that we approve the relocation poles of P1, P2, P3, and P4. Relocation of JO poles on Hartford Ave North beginning at a point approximately 35 feet north of the center line of the intersection of Main Street and Hartford Ave North and continuing approximately 450 feet in a northeast direction. Maureen Dwinell and I.
I would second the motion. Stephen Mettellion, aye.
Brett Simons, aye. Unanimous action. Thank you, Al. Thank you, Robert.
All right. Thank you all.
Have a good evening,
All
gentlemen.
right. Thank you. You too.
Next, we have a request or a note from the Girl Scout troop in Mendon, the Mendon Upton Cadet Girl Scouts. Do we have somebody here from the Girl Scouts? Must be Corrine, the GS leader.
Hi, Corrine and Lindsay Ward here too.
Hey, Lindsay. Hi. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi there. We have two of our scouts that are probably just figuring out how to get their videos on and unmute themselves. And they are hoping to let you know about our project or ask you about our project and introduce themselves. Maya and
Maya.
Okay. Do you see Ella?
Yes.
Okay, yes,
great.
we can see both.
Great. Go ahead, girls.
Okay. Hi, this is Cadet Girl Scout Troop 64528. We are in 7th grade and there are 10 members in our troop, and we have been a troop for about 7 years. And right now we are working on our Relationships Journey project.
We're asking you permission to plant flower beds in the town common to make Upton a more welcoming and colorful place. The town common is a good place to build relationships in a COVID-safe way because it is outside.
We are doing this to earn our Take Action journey. Our journey is about personal relationships and relationships with the community.
We will buy the flowers with troop funds and donations.
We will be using all perennials because they do not require as much maintenance and they will bloom beautifully every year.
This is a map of where we would like to put the flowers. The flowers are the squiggly lines.
Please consider our idea.
Awesome. Well, that's a wonderful job, ladies. Ella, Maya, thank you very much for the presentation and the information. It was very well thought out. I love the design there. That's definitely helpful. So what's the middle bar on the design? I saw that the squigglies were where the plants are going to go.
So the middle bar is the walkway, just to show you where we would like to put everything. So we want to put it over here and like on the opposite side too, and around the benches.
Gotcha. And then what's the little circle at the bottom there?
Oh, that's just the fountain, and the circle at the top is the monument so that you can tell where is where.
Got it. Awesome. Well, that looks beautiful. I love it. So a couple of things we clearly, at least from my perspective, would be very, very grateful for any work and energy and time and resources that you ladies would want to put into beautifying the town of Upton. One thing that I would point out that you may be glad to hear is we have a fund in the town of Upton that was created by one of the old families in town that ran some businesses and really played a key role in building the community of Upton. And they created a fund called the Beautification Fund. And this is a trust fund that has money in it that anybody that is interested in doing something for the town of Upton to make it more beautiful can use those funds to help support that activity. So in the case of what you're doing, I would absolutely encourage you to raise money and solicit people in the community to support what you're trying to do, but also know that you can come to the Board of Selectmen and we can help you with any funding that might be required or any gaps to fill in. So please keep that in mind.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Maureen, Steve, my two fellow select board members, any comments or questions for the ladies?
I think this is an awesome project, and thank you very much for considering us. And I agree with Brett. We do have funding for it if you need it, and I would certainly support it.
Thank you.
And I would echo those same sentiments as well. It's a great project, girls. Always nice to see people step forward and try to beautify our downtown. That's great. In your drawing, Ella, I think you held it up. Are you planning on planting right along the roadways? I couldn't exactly see all the squiggly lines.
Yeah, like over here by the edge where like the sidewalk starts.
Okay. Very good. I was just only thinking that when it's close to the roadway, a lot of times the flowers won't make it through the winter. So you might want to just be careful how close to the road you go with the flowers. They'll survive better if they're in towards the center of the common a little bit. And do you have any idea how many flowers you might like to plant?
We've been like talking about like the different types that we might want to plant. And we're definitely going to do all of them as perennials because they come up every year, so we don't have to replant them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's great.
Great.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, that was it. That was the end of my questioning.
Great. The only other person you may want to talk to that might help you in terms of understanding some of the best placements or locations are the DPW director. His name's Mr. Westgate, and he can help you understand because they have to maintain the sidewalks, and obviously they plow the roads, but what you're doing is going to be more associated with the sidewalk. So they may suggest that you put it a little bit further away from the sidewalk, that you put something around the border, but they may have some ideas that could help you as well, so that it lasts as long as possible and is there for the long run.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. You ladies are doing all the work.
Thank you so much for.
Yeah, and thanks for coming forward.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Yes, you as well. Derek, do we need to motion permission officially? Okay.
Yes.
So I would make a motion that we grant permission to Girl Scout Troop 66548, is it? 64528, sorry about that. Authorize them permission to plant some perennials in and along our town common. Stephen Metellian, aye.
Second, Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Maya, Ella, congratulations, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work, girls.
All right, next up we have the BVT one-day liquor license application. This is for their annual fundraiser that they do. Is there anyone here from BVT? I think they sent all the information was on the application. So it looks like they're looking for the event date of May 12th, 2021 for a beer or wine and malt beverages only. They'll have servers. They're expecting 100 people. It will be served between 6 and 8 p.m. by waiters and waitresses by the glass. And there will be Valley Tech staff for security and parking. Maureen, Steve, thoughts on this one?
No, I'm good with this.
Okay. I was going to say, as far as I can recall, we have, they do this fundraiser every year. I think last year they may not have done it due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But yeah, it looks pretty straightforward.
Okay.
There was made mention in the final paragraph of the letter. There is a fee that's charged every year, so I think we need to, continue with that each year.
Yeah, I would support that.
I would support that also.
Okay. Maureen, do you want to make the motion?
I will make the motion that we approve the application for the BVT school to hold their annual get-together on May 12th, 2021 for their superintendent's gourmet dinner fundraiser. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion. Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Next up, we have a motion to declare surplus equipment. I assume, Derek, you want to walk us through this one?
Yeah, just give me 1 second here. Okay, so every time, we usually do this once a year where we go around to all the different departments and ask them what they have for surplus equipment. Typically that comes in the springtime because usually we fund all capital equipment in the fall. So much like every other year, we have a number of items that need to be voted on as surplus so that we can put them out for auction. I can read to you the items that are slated for surplus. Coming from the DPW, we have a 1963 clock C20B forklift. Now remember, we just funded a new forklift this past year. We have a 2001 Cushman Textron turf truck. We have a trackless snowblower, a black utility wagon for a lawnmower, a red utility wagon for a lawnmower, 2 yellow plastic swim rafts without ladders. That's from the DPW. The library has a 2016 Xerox photocopier, and then the police department, as you would imagine, has a 2013 Ford Interceptor. So those are the items that are slated for surplus. With your approval, we can go ahead and put these on the town's auction list.
Great. Thank you. Any questions, Steve or Maureen?
No, I don't have any questions.
I do remember we just recently declared one of the former police vehicles as surplus. Would this be another one? Is this a secondary one?
This is a second one. The one we did last year, believe it or not, was last summer. So this would be a second one. We haven't even gone to auction for that other cruiser that we surplus a year ago.
Okay. Very good.
Okay, I'll take a motion.
Okay. Make a motion that we declare surplus equipment, the items that Derek just mentioned to us, the forklift, fork truck, the rafts, wagon, and the police interceptor. Stephen Mattellion, aye.
Second, Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Next up, we have the American Rescue Plan funds discussion. Derek was kind enough to send us a link to the latest information coming from the state on that, the MMA. I reviewed that, as I'm sure Maureen, you and Steve did as well. Derek, is there sort of an overview or information you want to share with us on this?
Just that the town is slated to receive approximately anywhere from $2.3 to $2.4 million to be used for purposes of water and sewer infrastructure, revenue replacement, to help support those folks that are in need, and then lastly to help small businesses try to pull themselves out of this pandemic. Unfortunately, the Department of Treasury still hasn't provided any guidance as to the specifics on how we can use those monies and how they expect it to be dispersed. I can tell you, though, that we are slated to receive this money by mid-May. The first round of money we expect to see hit our accounts by mid-May, but we don't have any further guidance other than what's already been written to the legislature. In addition to that, the schools have received approximately $483,000 of what is known as ESSER 3 dollars. They received a round of ESSER 1 last year and a second round of ESSER 2 in the fall. So they're getting a third round of what is known as ESSER 3. Right around the same time, we're getting our funds for the American Rescue
Plan. Okay, great. Maureen, Steve?
No questions of yet. I'm just waiting for the federal guidelines to come out to make sure that we spend it correctly.
Yep.
Derek, I read over the attachment from the MMA and I see the 4 definitions or descriptions of how it can be used. And, I understand revenue replacement, reaching out or trying to promote small business or trying to help small business recover. When you look at that, what jumps out to you? I mean, how do you see the best use? I mean, I look at it and I say, it seems for us where we don't have a lot of revenue on the municipal side that we have, suffered a loss due to COVID. It would appear to me that really the investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure really seem to be what really jumps out at me out of this list as the best way to use the money. Or do you see a way to use it towards small business? Of course, I'm a small business owner in town, so I'd be interested in hearing how that may affect businesses.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with you, Steve, that I think that certainly when we look at the town's priorities, water, sewer infrastructure certainly rises to the top. The time bomb analysis will help guide us as to how we can use those dollars in a prioritized way. As far as small businesses, I had a conference call with a number of area town managers, and Julie Jacobson, who is the town manager in Auburn, was the former assistant city manager for economic development in Worcester prior to her Auburn days. This is really what she does, works with businesses and promotes economic development in Auburn. She thought the best thought, again, without any federal guidance, that we may have to use some of these dollars to offer mini grants for small businesses. But really, what does that mean? When I was in Worcester, we would offer mini grants for like facade improvements and equipment replacement. Oftentimes these are either like low interest or 0% interest grants just to get a business to the next level, so that they didn't have to go to a bank. Other than that, though, that's kind of the only ideas that have really come to mind with the area town managers. Again, this is all lack of any federal guidance at this point.
Could I ask Derek a question?
Yep.
On the economic part, as far as businesses go, could we include any economic development that we wanted to do?
I mean, I think it's all on the table at this point as far as, what is the best use of these dollars. I don't think revenue replacement is going to be a big ticket item. Neighbor to Neighbor has really done a great job of supporting those folks that are in need. So I think economic development, small business support, and then ultimately infrastructure improvement would probably be the three areas we would focus most of our conversations around.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to not include the small businesses either. I mean to include them plus add to under the economic development plan that we already have.
And that's a good thought. I mean, I think now that the EDC has finalized their economic development plan, there may be some ideas that the EDC should consider some uses for these dollars. But again, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, only because I'm not really certain what the feds are going to allow us to use this money for just yet, other than those 4 buckets that they proposed within the legislation.
Do we know what kind of a timeline they have before they let us know?
So I did get a notice today that April 21st is supposed to be a webinar that hopefully, this is a third-party webinar, so it's not being sanctioned by the state. Hopefully from that webinar, we'll get a little bit more detailed information. But again, we're supposed to be receiving this money in 4 weeks from now. So I would suspect that we'll get that guidance within the next week or two at the latest.
Well, it would be better planning for us if we did.
Yeah, and I think a key part of this will be recognizing that, we'll want to be very clear about and they'll give us this, right? The time horizon that we have to spend it, because I think we're going to want to make sure that once we have the clarity and the guidance, that we're very thoughtful and deliberate and intentional about where we can make the best use of these funds. I think we all agree that supporting small businesses is critical. We've supported our people through the Up to Neighbor. So again, I think we're in good shape there. And then obviously the infrastructure, water, sewer, et cetera, is going to be a big part of this and a big opportunity as well. But I think knowing that, we still have to avail ourselves of whatever time we're afforded, even once we have the money in the bank, to make sure that we're being really intentional about what we do with these funds, because it's a special opportunity.
And I think it's important along those lines. The way it appears to me, it'll be the Board of Selectmen's decision how to invest the dollars, best for the community. And, although it sounds, and it certainly is, a large sum of money, we realize when it comes to infrastructure, as we look at these projects that we've just recently come across, whether it be water and sewer lines, in advance of the TIP project on High Street, proposed sidewalks, I&I situations, all these things, you realize that, we could take one project and spend this whole amount of money. So,
exactly.
Those going to be tough decisions. And the other interesting thing as I read through here, we had this discussion last week was, is there any way we could use this towards education? And it doesn't look like there's any leeway at all where this could be used towards education dollars. So, like I say, number 4 really jumps out to me.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be the one that's probably going to be, the best use of where probably 95% of those dollars are going to go.
Yeah, I tend to agree, for sure. All right, anything else on this one? If not, we can move on. Okay. Next up, we have the changing the location of the town election voting from Nipmock to the town hall. We saw the memo from the town clerk. And I know we talked a little bit about this last week, and I think the options we talked about were moving the date out to the 18th and still having it at Nipmock, or keeping the same date and moving the location to town hall. And I think we were leaning toward changing the location as opposed to the date, but Maureen or Steve, what do you guys have strong feelings either way, or what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, my feeling would be if we had it at town hall, do we have the parking facilities and people, you're going to have people holding signs. I know they have to stay so many feet away from around the town hall itself, just as they do Nipmuc. But the parking would be my question of if we could provide it.
Mm-hmm. Kelly, do you want to talk through that?
Yeah, so Maureen, I would ask all town hall employees to park over at the VFW parking and walk to the building. So that would leave the park, I think there's about 13, 14 spaces next to town hall, and as well as the 12 to 14 spaces across the street.
Okay.
So that's at least 30, which is more than we usually have for an annual town election at Nipmuc. And then I would also ask for an extra detail for a police officer to cross people across Main Street, so no one's taking their life in their hands. And lastly, we've always, up until 2004, we had our town elections at town hall, and people stood at the common and held their signs at the common. And that's definitely, more than 150 feet away. And I think I would just advise all candidates that that's where they should be standing if we choose Upton Town Hall as a location.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
I guess the other question I would really have is regarding, the ballot questions. I think we made an adjustment last week, and where do we stand now with the override question? And I think that's going to be a determining factor as far as what we do here.
With the location or the date, I feel like those are separate, but tell me how they're connected.
Well, when we met last week, we discussed removing the override question.
We removed it. That's done. We did that.
Okay. Is that back on the table?
No. I mean, I don't think so. We did the ballot. So this is if we wanted to. I would say that's a different discussion, because that's not going to affect the town election that we have scheduled now for the 11th, as far as I understand it. But we can, certainly disagree with me or clarify that. I was thinking that this was the election location change, and then once we do that, we know that if we did do something with the override or the funding, that would have to be a special election or a special town meeting, depending upon what we did.
Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to get around to is this. If we have the election on the 18th at Nipmock, both ballot questions can be on that ballot. The way it is now, it would appear that you'd have to have two separate voting actions. You'd have to have an action on the actual election and the debt exclusion, and then you would have a separate election for an school override question.
So my understanding is that we can't change the ballot to, even if we did the election on the 18th, but Kelly, can you help us with the timing and sequencing of all this?
So for the annual town election ballot, that has been set because 35 days before May 11th was last Tuesday, and that's what you voted. And so you cannot add anything on to the annual town election ballot at this point. And to your point, having it at Upton Town Hall when it comes to having a debt exclusion on the ballot, further down in the memo that I wrote, I asked for the Board of Selectmen to approve early voting. So I was kind of hoping that would help disperse the voting throughout the week before the election, so it wouldn't be as crowded at the town hall.
Yep.
So I just wanted to add that.
Okay. I think what I'm saying is it's absolutely ludicrous to a week ago Tuesday remove a question and now require two separate voting actions. So we would therefore need to move the election to a date that's sufficient that we can include all voting actions on one ballot. If it's May 18th, it's May 18th. If it's May 30th, it's May 30th. If we need a special action out of Boston, let's apply for the special action. But there's no way that we can be professionals and serve the people and ask them to vote on two separate dates a week apart from one another or a month apart from one another.
Yeah, I think the intent is, and maybe we just need to talk about all of this together. So why don't we just assume that this is all part of one conversation, right? Because it sounds like, Steve, to your point, that these things are inextricably linked. So, why don't we consider both agenda item 4.4 and 4.5 as one conversation? I think that's going to be easier because it just doesn't make sense to separate them, Steve, based on what your perspective is. So let's talk about that. There is still an opportunity using some of the mechanisms, Steve, that you've talked about in the past, and this is what we're going to have to discuss, is to accomplish the objectives that we had talked about last week when we met in terms of helping the voters for at least one more year by deferring that override for a year. If we use last week, we thought that we would be able to use just the road money as well as, a reduction in the school's budget of, I'm going to just ballpark these numbers, $500,000. They didn't recertify their budget, as we all well know. There is an opportunity to use the money that we were going to put, Steve, into free cash or into stabilization to also put that towards temporarily, just for this year, to fund the schools. What that does is it allows us to have the election on the 11th as planned and as we've talked about. We wouldn't have to have a separate or special ballot or a separate discussion or conversation around an override. That conversation would happen next year when the schools would come back and we'd have to fund them, right? Because we know that if we use call it $500,000, $600,000 worth of road money, and we use the money that we would normally put into stabilization this year, that we are creating some structural problems with the budget, and we're really just, to your point, Steve, we talked about this last week, right? Kicking the can down the road till next year. But a year without the additional taxes on the taxpayers is a year without the additional taxes on the taxpayers. And if we can use free cash to support that, then I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, and we'll see where we are next year. We'll have to come up with the right model to put that money, you know, frankly, on the schools, so that if there is an override, that we need to make up that difference, because we are going to have to put the money back into the roads next year. We know that. I think we're all committed to that. And we're going to need to balance the budget. And so in order to do those things, we would have to look to the schools to have an override that would support their budget next year. So that's the possibility, and you know, that was why we were thinking about, or I was thinking about keeping this on the 11th, just doing it at Nipmock, or I'm sorry, at the town hall.
So what you're saying, Brett, is we are going to try and fund it within the budget rather than go for an override.
For this,
using the road money and the money we were going to put in the stabilization.
Yeah.
I'm all about the infrastructure. And if you and Steve would agree that we could use the American ARP money to fund the roads through doing water and sewer infrastructure. I know the water has a lot of pipes and things to be fixed. They have to be replaced, and with that, the road becomes part of the construction. I would vote to use the road money this year, as long as that next year we reinsert the article for the road money. And I'd like to take a vote on that, because I might not be here next year, but if you two vote on it now and we all vote on it, then it's in stone.
I'm pretty sure you have to be here next year. Don't think you're jumping out on us early before the election.
Can't retire just yet, Maureen. Come on.
Nice
leave us with those tax bills? Those angry residents? No.
We're just.
But the school also has to understand that they're going to have to make up that 1.4 million in an override, plus any increases that they need in their budget.
Right.
And and do we know what they're using their ESSA money for, the $483,000?
You know, I was hoping that at some point in time, Maureen, just to piggyback on that thought, I was hoping at some point in time that we would have another explanation. I don't know if we're going to have an opportunity to sit down with the school committee. I was busy last night. I was going to try to log on to the meeting last night. But ESSER 1 was $56,500. ESSER 2 was $218,644. These are the notes I made. And then there's ESSER 3 at $483. So, I mean, that's what, round about $750,000? Plus FEMA money, plus who knows where the other money. So, you know, other monies like governor's supplemental budget, things of that nature. So I don't know what their total take has been since we certified last year.
Well, the other thing too is I know they can't use it for one-time expenses, but the school has a lot of one-time expenses that they could use either for technology or athletics or whatever. I know they can't hire teachers or anything like that. But aren't they even going to put this $483,000 towards the budget? That's what I'd like to know.
Yeah, I think that you know, unfortunately, those answers haven't been shared, and they may or may not know the answers. But what we know for our purposes is that the budget is certified at the amount they certified it at. So whatever they're going to do with that money, they've decided to either hold off on making that decision or commitment, and or to not share it, and whatever it is their choice. They've certified their budget for the year, and that's what we have to figure out how to pay. You know, and I agree, if we cover it this year, it's with a very clear understanding that next year we're not going to be assumptive about this amount of funding, right? This is a stopgap measure to buy us a year to potentially use funding coming from the federal government to support the taxpayers and avoid this override for the year. And if we can accomplish that, when we come back next year, the discussion is going to be, hey, remember last year we used $1 million between roads money and money that was going to go into stabilization. Schools, you need to make that up this year and not assume that you're going to get that every year like you would with an override, because I don't think that's what any of us want to commit to or are willing to commit to. And we haven't let you talk, Steve, so go ahead, please.
I mean, it just, to me, it gets very, very messy. We start this project in December, the whole budget process, warrant articles, we start all this back in December. Now we're potentially crossing a path where I understand we have, I think it was maybe 2A, I can't exactly remember, I don't have the warrant open in front of me, but Derek 2A, which is that article that gives us the flexibility to, or gave us the flexibility to, you know, drop an override question. Now, in my opinion, you would have to reopen the warrant because you would have to redraft those two questions. So that 462 in stabilization and that 592 in road money, you'd have to take those two and recraft those questions, because you're going to use those monies to fund the school.
I think we would just withdraw those two articles.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't be in support of doing it that way. Now you're going to just take your operational budget, you're going to plug in a $1.4 million override on your operational side of the budget?
Well, it would be the million that we talked about last week, because the funding that we had put into the budget as the placeholder was, you know, again, I'm gonna do this in $500,000 increments because I don't have the math in front of me, right? So basically, there was $500,000 that we had allocated, so that left us with $1 million. We were hoping that the schools would give back, recertify their budget for $500,000 less, and we were going to use the road money to cover the other $500,000. So the only thing that's changed since last week, which is significant, is that the schools didn't sort of kick in their $500,000. So what's changed since last week is that we're now saying, okay, do we want to make up that $500,000 through using money that's in free cash and stabilization that we're always trying to use to try to give the taxpayer some relief for a year? Or do we want to put that override out there this year and have to have two separate questions and deal with two different ballots? Because no matter what, we can't have it on one ballot. That's just, it's not an option as far as I understand, because we have the election warrant, the election ballot is already released, like that's done. Yeah, that's that, right?
I think what I'm getting around, Maureen, just give me 1 second to kind of finish this thought.
Yep.
So the 562 was a raise and appropriate. So mathematically, yeah, you could combine that on the operational line. You know, what we plugged in, again, Brett, we'll use that 500 that you mentioned, that 500 that's plugged into the budget presentation. We could move that over, you know, and I don't think it would upset the dollars and cents. But that 462 that was supposed to go to stabilization, that's free cash. So if you're going to fund it, you'd still have to at least recraft that particular question. You know, because again, it was asking to move it from free cash over, but just before I even go there with that, is it's still an override and we're not treating it as an override. You know, the people should have the option. It's an optional tax ultimately when you boil it down. People should have the ability to vote yes, I want to have this optional tax. I want to fund 1.4 million, or we had it crafted at 1,042,000. I want to pay it, or I don't want to pay it. And by shuffling and taking, you know, moving that money from different piles and shuffling it, I'm not comfortable with it. I don't feel that's being honest and forthright with the taxpayer. But again, that's just me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear you. I think that the critical thing from my perspective is that because you're absolutely right. Like this isn't a game of, hey, we're gonna pay this for a year so that you don't get to vote on the override, right? We're not increasing the taxes for this year to fund the schools. We're using the money that we have to pay for the school budget for 1 year, knowing that next year the taxpayers will have the option to pay for the schools or not. When it's going to come out of their pocket, they'll be able to decide, are we going to pay for this or not? All I'm suggesting is that instead of doing that this year, we do it next year, because we have the unique opportunity this year of having federal funds as part of ARC to help us use to offset the cost just for this year. Steve, I'm 100% with you that if this becomes a permanent tax, the way and the schools would be funded every year with this, absolutely taxpayers need to have the choice to vote on that up or down. Absolutely. My only point is that doing that next year versus this year still gives the taxpayers the power to make that decision. And none of us here, certainly neither Maureen nor myself, and I'm guessing you, are making a commitment to fund the schools at this level in perpetuity. It literally is absolutely crystal clear that this is a 1 year exception that we're going through because of the unique timing and the unique opportunity we have with the ARP money to push this override out 1 year.
My question, I mean, maybe you could answer this, Derek, that if we fund it within our budget and Mendon goes for the override, which I believe would be for them $800,000 unless the school uses their ESSA money, what would happen to and the town of Upton voted it down, what would happen to the money that we have already allocated to the schools?
That's a good question. So based upon what Brett just proposed, we would be budgeting the $1.4 million request assessment. If Mendon were to vote against that, the schools would have to recertify at a lower amount, and whatever the net gain is on the town of Upton side, and I'm just making up another, say the schools recertified and the town was able to save $400,000, we would want, my recommendation is to have a special town meeting so that you can reappropriate that balance of the gain through the recertification process.
So has the school let anybody know, you or Brett or anybody know what they're going to use their ESSA money for?
I do not know what they're going to use their ESSA money for. I do not.
Could we ask them that question?
I mean, I don't think it's going to affect the conversation we're having here in any way, but Phil, you're here. Why don't you share your 2 cents?
Yeah, I'll give you my quick 2 cents on where we are with the ESSER money. Is that our, similar to you, we're in the process right now. We've got 18 different uses, and we're trying to figure out what actually fits within those buckets. So we're still trying to figure out that number and kind of what we'll be able to apply that $484,000 to. Okay, and understanding it's got things like learning loss, addressing summer programs, after school programs, infrastructure of the school, one-time costs, things like that. To what was said before, we can't spend that money for teachers, curriculum, to some degree, and those kinds of things. So we're in the same boat you are, where we're in the process of working that through. The other thing I would make a comment on, at least, is in the process of what could potentially happen if you certify kind of the funding in the way you're talking about, and I understand what you're saying. What would happen if the override, we'll call it, failed in Mendon? There's really a couple of paths that would be taken. One would be, because essentially Upton has approved the funding, and if Mendon hasn't, we could recertify at a lower number and allow Mendon to go back and do another vote on a different kind of override. Or, the other part that we could do as well is we could actually have a joint town meeting, which would bring the two sides together And, essentially if the collective group in that joint town meeting agreed that this was the right budget, well, then Mendon would have to figure out what they were going to do and how they were going to fund the school already certified at. And, I mean, those are kind of options way down the road. The normal approach will be that we will take another stab at what the budget really looks like, and and what can Mendon truly afford, and what are they going to put out there. Kind of where we're at.
So I think what we would. Oh, go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Brett, while Phil is got a live microphone, I wasn't on that meeting last night, and I must say that Mr. DeZetta lobbied very hard for the board to consider that number that the budget committee had put together, which reduced our increase to $992 and Mendon's to $421. This was discussed at an earlier budget meeting. Phil made a good case as to why the district should consider basically voting at a lower budget. However, that fell upon deaf ears with the remaining members of the committee, and I will say, Phil lobbied pretty hard, and I think he represented the interests of those concerned here that know how the process works. I think he represented them very well, but he was outvoted at that extent. So
yeah, I mean, what I would say is, I think very simply, there were two competing views. One was the view of what we had here. The other was the view that I'll say, what, the number is the number. We need those roles, those positions. The budget is reflective of what we need to do, especially in these times. And that, I think many people felt because it was going to be put out to the people over in Mendon anyways, we should just put it out there and let the people decide. So that was kind of the way it was looked at. But in terms of how ESSER will reduce the amount or affect the amount, we're still working that through. And the reality is similar to, the conversation you're having here, we're all up against deadlines trying to make this kind of work quickly.
Yeah, and however it's used, it doesn't change what was certified. So thank you. Appreciate all of your support and advocacy, and thank you, Paul, for recognizing Phil's position and support. We appreciate you being here and sharing the updates and being the intermediary between our conversations and those of the school committee and the budget committee. So we're grateful for that. So I think, Maureen, what we had talked about was withdrawing the roads article. And just to clarify, can we withdraw the free cash article, or how does that, do we need to reword it, Derek, or can we just withdraw that? Because the money's going to be back, so.
I'll give you my opinion. The article reads, it's a transfer of $436,497 from free cash to stabilization. My opinion is I don't see why we can't just change it, the same number, just move it to fund the school district. It doesn't appear, in my opinion, that it's a change of the use of the article. It's just a change of where the money's going. And as you all know, when we submit a draft warrant, the articles are draft, and as long as they stay within, as our moderator would say, within the four corners, we can change it. We can adjust the language accordingly. That's my opinion of that article. Article 9, which is the roads article for 562,380, would, as Steve pointed out, would just be withdrawn, and because it's a raise and appropriate, would just be moved under the schools line item. And so with those two changes, you'd still have a balance of approximately $43,795, and with the governor's budget, that number would be absorbed with the $60,000 savings within the governor's budget.
Yeah. Okay. And so if we made those two changes tonight, we would then be able to, because we're not going to have the any override this year, we would be able to stick with the current town meeting date with the location at the town hall. Is that right?
That's what you chose, you would be able to do that, yes.
Okay. And so, Maureen, I think that would be the intent, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I look at that and I say, again, getting back to that transfer, you're transferring 462 from free cash to stabilization. Now you're going to ask the taxpayer to take 462,000 and apply it to a one-time operational expense. Because again, that doesn't go away next year. You've got to budget that next year and then some, because they're looking for, let's be forthright. I hope Phil is still on, because I don't want to say this after he's signed off. I see that he is. Let me be perfectly frank. There has not been a year that there's not budgetary problems and it's 500,000, 900,000 and so on and so forth. I mean, last year there was a total increase to the district. I believe it was $1.1 million. So, what do we do if after the override, now we start planning for FY23, and that override, you've got to tax it the following year. But now what do you do if, oh, by the way, we need another 1.4 million. That's the new certified budget. Upton's share is 880,000. What do we do then? You've got to
clarify something.
Well, if we pull.
Hold on.
I think it's important that I clarify something, Steve, because I wanted to make sure people understood. So last year we had a $1.4 million piece,
Bill,
but that ended up shrinking.
Bill, hang on a second. Steve,
okay.
Finish your thought.
Okay. So the thought was, again, I'll go back just a little. Last year, obviously, it got decreased. Upton's share, I believe, was 592 or 600,000 or somewhere in that order. Now, if we do this where we start moving money around, not only do we have to raise that money for the following year, but now what if the district comes in after this override and comes in the following year and says, hey, this has changed, that's changed, the other things changed, and we need an increase in our operational budget now to $42 million, and it's another $1.5 million for both towns. Upton's share is, again, $880,000. Now Upton's got to, once again, figure out a way to fund that additional $880,000. So the problem is there's no stability. Each year, these dollars are just, getting away from us. And, we certainly can't fund it from within our budget. So we're having to take money out of stabilization, or here's a situation where we're going to try to take money out of two separate buckets, in addition to a raise and appropriate. So I guess that's where I'm trying to, try to rationalize is how are we going to sustain it at the rate that we're going?
Go ahead, Maureen.
Well, that's why when I asked you to agree to using the ARP money for the road projects, that it make it perfectly clear next year that we would be pulling that $1.4 million back, and that they would have to go for the override for $1.4 million at that time.
And I would say to that, I would not agree to anything at this juncture in time about how I would be in favor of spending ARP money until I'm 100% clear of how I can use ARP money. And I don't want to agree if for some reason, and I don't know what that reason may be, but if the Fed says you can use it for this, but you can't use it for that, you can this and you can that, I don't want to therefore say, yeah, we'll backfill. Because ultimately, Maureen, what we're doing is we're taking the ARP money and we're spending it on education. That's ultimately what we're doing. I mean, you can rationalize it any way you want, but if you're taking your road money this way and you say, well, I'm going to take it out of ARP next year, again, you're just funneling that money over to the educational side. And I get it,
And that's again why I asked to reinsert the article next year for the road part of it, to use the ARP money this year for the water projects or sewer projects. The biggest project is your water project, and we have to replace all these water mains. You have to dig up the road, and that's when the road becomes part of the construction project.
And I'm sure we still have AC pipe in the ground. We know that there's more of that.
We have a lot of AC pipe in the ground.
Absolutely agree with you on that. I think that's a little bit down the road. I know we're expecting the money sooner rather than later, but again, I don't want to count that money until I absolutely know with 100% certainty. Look, we made a decision last week, and we based it on good faith information, and now here it is. We're last week's meeting, for all intents and purposes, you know, I hate to say it, but we really accomplished nothing because we're redoing everything that we did last week.
Well, and that's the other problem that I have. I thought we were going to be a team and work together and try and come to an agreement on how to fund all this. But it doesn't seem like we're getting any cooperation. And I'm not blaming you, Phil. I think you've done a wonderful job. But I mean, we need to come together as a town, whether we're school or town or whatever, and put our heads together to try and figure this out. I mean, we're trying to do it on our side, but the best way we can. And it's just not working out.
So, go ahead, Paul. I want to be careful not to rehash the school committee meeting, but go ahead.
The fallacy to that, Maureen, is that you're dealing with Mendon, and you can't control what they do. And just one other aspect, with you're talking about going forward with the school budget. If for some reason, just out of clear blue, the school district should end up with maybe 2 or 3 sped residential programs that could whack them for $750,000 or more, and I'm just using that number, okay? I'm just taking that number. You can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about it. You have to pay it. So, making these grandiose assumptions and saying, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, you can't do that now. You have to talk, you got to get next year, when next year comes, you can try to lay the groundwork, but you have to go and approach year by year, because things are going on in that school budget over which you have no control. Now, if this were a town school, it'd be a different thing. You could tell, the selectman could tell the superintendent, you're going to, reduce your budget by 15%, okay? In this situation, you cannot do it. The school district is a municipality unto itself. You give them the funding and they operate on their own. So, there's more to it than we're not going to pay this year or we're not going to pay next year. You have to know all the facts behind it.
But hold on a second. I'd like to disagree with you, as we usually do, Paul. There is something that you can do. The taxpayers can say no. And then you make a decision, just like all of us do in our everyday life when you wheel your carriage through the grocery store. You make a decision. It's this or that, not this and that. And that's the decisions that are going to have to be made sooner rather than later.
What I was, if I may, just what I was referring to is, if that school budget increases $750,000 by the reason of a SPED situation, you can't control it. Okay?
We absolutely understood. There's things beyond our control. We get that. What is in our control is what we do over the next couple of weeks. And I think that we have a very good plan that we've all been very transparent about. We've talked about it. It's a public meeting. It's going to be in the paper. The warrant article, the warrant we're going to send around to people. There clearly will be deliberation on all of this at town meeting. There will be, when we get to next year's budget, I think we're all, at least I'm committing, Maureen, that roads money will be back into the town budget next year. The school's going to have to go for their override next year. And what we're doing is simply a stopgap measure to say, we're not going to vote on an override this year. We're going to have that vote next year and give the voters the choice next year. This year we have some free cash and road money and money coming in from the federal government, the taxpayers. from taxpayer money from the federal government that we can use to get us through the next year. So we're going to do that. And it's a sacrifice that we have to make, but it buys us 1 year of not having to do or ask the taxpayers to fund an override. And we're going to ask that question next year. And next year, the question is going to be for the full amount of the override. It's not going to include the $1 million that we're kicking in this year. It's just not. And I think that certainly I'm committing to that. Maureen, I think that's your perspective. And Steve, I can't speak for you, but I think that sequence of events gets us to where we need to be and where we talked about last week, minus the $500,000 from free cash. So with that, do we need to make motions, Derek, for each of the 2 articles and then for the location of the meeting?
Yeah, based upon tonight's discussion, you're going to have to make, assuming, I took notes, that assuming the board wants to withdraw Article 2A, you need a motion there, withdraw Article 9, that's the roads, motion there, amend Article 7, instead of transferring to stabilization, transfer to the school district. Yeah, your 4th motion would be whatever you decide to do regarding the election, location or date.
Yeah. Okay. Maureen or Steve, is there anything else you want to say about this before we make the motion?
I mean, I don't really, frankly, I don't really like it. I'm not in favor of it. I think it's an override. Call it an override. Vote it an override. Discuss it as an override. Because we did the same thing last year. We kicked it from last year to this year. Now here it is. We're facing it this year, and now we're ultimately proposing kicking it again another year next year. So I don't know. That's just not my particular style of leadership. It's, you got to cross that bridge. You got to make a decision one way or the other. We're in a worldwide pandemic. There's not a lot I see positive out on the horizon as far as the economy, and we're talking about spending an awful lot of money, laying a lot of tax on the people, and I'm not in favor of it.
Well, we're actually talking about keeping the taxes lower this year than they would be if we did the override, right? If the override passed. So,
right. I agree, Brett.
Yeah, I just want to be clear about that we're not adding taxes in a year when it's difficult. What we're trying to do is push that out a year. The same reason.
Try and keep them down.
Right.
Well, I guess the part I'm not telling you is my gut tells me it fails. So if my gut tells me it fails, I'd rather see it go stand on its own 2 legs and let it fail. And then let's get our heads together. I'll go to every damn school committee meeting I got to go to, and let's sit down, let's open up, let's look at some job descriptions, and let's really see what we need to do here, because we got something that is awry. But again, my gut tells me it fails, so I'd much rather see it stand on its own.
Yeah, my gut tells me it would definitely pass. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. I mean, I think the last.
And I agree, Brett.
Yeah, the last override passed at town hall unanimously, and I would expect that the same would be not unanimously this year or at the ballot. Certainly can't be unanimous at the ballot, but I think that an override would pass heartily, and but that's fine. It's all speculation, but I do want to be clear that the intent here is to keep taxes down for 1 more year. Right? Like, let's be clear about that. We're not talking about adding taxes. We're talking about using the money that we've got to take a stopgap measure to keep the taxes down for 1 more year while we all can work through this pandemic a little bit further. Things can start to stabilize a bit, and then people can make a decision next year about whether or not they want to pay the tax next year. That there's no increase to the tax this year by funding it out of our budget.
And I'm hoping that we'll recover from this pandemic next year, where the economy will pick up and maybe we'll be in a better situation. If we can fund it this year, I'd rather do it now and then not have to do it next year anyways.
Yeah.
We have to be positive about this pandemic coming to some kind of closure soon.
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
All right. So Maureen, did you write all those motions down? If not, we can go through them again.
No, did you want me to?
Somebody's got to make the motions.
All right.
It's not going to.
We're going to make the motion on the location change for the election, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be the first one.
Okay. I will move
We'll
that
start
we change the annual town election voting location to the Upton Town Hall on May 11th. Is that one good?
Yes.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Mattelli, aye.
All right. So now I would
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous. Let's enjoy that unanimity while we can.
Are you abstaining on that one, Brett?
He voted.
Oh, sorry. No, I said aye, unanimous action. Sorry, maybe there was a conflict. Yeah, so Brett Simus, aye, unanimous action to the change or the location change, sorry, for the town election.
All right. So then.
All right.
I would make a motion that we pass over I believe it's 562,000 Article 9 for the annual town meeting. And
it's to withdraw,
Article
right?
Withdraw, correct. And the article number for the free cash is, I don't have the warrant in front of me.
Do we want to do each one of these separate? Because I feel like there's maybe some.
Okay. Then I will make a motion that we withdraw Article 9 for the highway DPW for $562,000 for roads. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Mattelli, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action.
And I would make, what is the article number, Derek, on the free cash?
Yep. Article 7 is the free cash transfer of $436,497. It's currently slated to go to stabilization.
And I would make a motion that we withdraw Article 7 for the free cash transfer of 400 and modifying it.
We go on is it the school committee line item or what's it called, Derek?
Yeah.
All right, let's do
this. The regional school district.
All right, the motion is that we redefine the Article 7 use of $436,997. $497 to the school budget allocation.
If I may, I would say as a supplemental appropriation to fund the operational budget of the Mendon Upton Regional School District.
Okay, as a supplemental funding to the operational budget for the school district. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Stephen Mattelli, nay.
Brett Simus, aye. Majority action.
And the last, since you've made those motions, it's just an administrative process now to withdraw Article 2A, which would be the override.
I would make a motion that we withdraw Article 2A for the override for the school operational budget. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Nay, Stephen Metellian.
Brett Simus, aye. Majority action.
Then, if the board so chooses, if you could make a motion to allow for early voting at this year's annual election.
I would make a motion that we do early voting at the annual town election on May 11th. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. And do we need a motion to fully execute the warrant, or did those three changes do that, Derek?
Those changes have been made. If I could just give you a summary of the other changes based upon last week's discussion. Steve wanted us to adjust the snow and ice budget, which is now at $50,000. And then we've adjusted the geese article, now $7,000. In addition to that, the warrant would be posted for a 9 a.m. start on May 8th with a potential rain date for May 15th at 9 a.m. as well. Right now, we're scheduled to be on the football field. That's been confirmed. We have already secured a contractor that will provide a jumbotron and 350 seats for those individuals who wish to attend.
Okay. So
So yes, I would just want you to, based upon what I just described as the amendments, if you could just vote to execute the warrant.
Okay. Well, let's do that first, and then. Got it. So the updates around the location and the seats and all that was that's just
information.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, that's what was throwing me off.
Derek, do you need to change the CPC one from 2,000 to 2,100?
Yeah, we Steve had brought that up earlier, and we've made that adjustment as well. It's now at 2,100.
Okay.
I guess just as a point of interest, or just for the record, again, if we're going to execute the warrant, I imagine we're executing the operational side of the warrant as well. The dollar values of those, and now we're altering that school budget dollar value. So I'm not in favor of that. Just for the record.
At this time, I would make a motion to execute the annual town meeting warrant as amended. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
I second the motion. Stephen Metellian, aye, other than my previous objections.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. May board meeting dates, or anything else on any of those topics before we go to May dates? All right, go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Sandy.
I'm sorry. Was that a unanimous or a majority to execute?
Unanimous to execute. Steve wanted to go on the record about his lack of support for putting the money for school funding and changing the numbers for the operational budget to include the school funding, the extra school funding that they're looking for this year. Is that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Steve, but I just want to make sure that that's what you were wanting to get a message. You're on mute, sorry.
Yes, things that we have discussed, whether it be previous warrant articles or whatnot.
Yeah.
But yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anything else on any of those topics before we talk about May dates? All right, go ahead, Derek.
So just because, May is going to be an unusual month with the annual town meeting coming up, we are scheduled, we would normally be meeting on the 4th and the 18th. The last time we talked about May dates, we had said that we would forego the 4th and meet on the 6th. So I guess the first question is, do we want to meet on May 4th, or do we just want to move that meeting to May 8th, like we always do prior to town meeting? And then the election will be on May 11th, and then so the following week we would meet on May 18th.
Sorry, did you say May 8th or May 4th? May 8th is a Saturday.
So May 4th is our normal scheduled meeting, but normally we haven't met on that Tuesday prior to town meeting because we meet always an hour before town meeting starts. So my question is, do we want to hold our regularly scheduled meeting on May 4th, or do we just want to hold off and then meet, as we always do, the hour before the beginning of town meeting, which in this case would be May 8th?
Got it. That's what was confusing me, was the 8th. Got it. So before town meeting on the 8th. Okay. I don't feel strongly one way or the other. It seems like are we meeting, so does that mean that would be our next meeting, or would we also meet on the 27th, which is 2 weeks from today?
We're already scheduled to meet on the 27th, yes.
Okay, so we'll have the meeting on the 27th, 2 weeks from today, and then potentially not the 4th and just have that meeting on the 8th. I mean, that seems fine to me, Steve, Maureen. I don't know if you feel like we should have that meeting on the 4th or what.
I don't. Where we're having a meeting on the 27th, I think the 8th would be fine.
Yeah, I would say unless there's something pressing, a hearing of some sort, I think we could probably skip over until the 8th.
Okay. And then the following meeting, so we'd be on our typical cadence to be meeting on May 18th.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, and then we're back to our regular first and third Tuesday cadence.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Works for me. You guys good with that? Steve, Maureen, good? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Town manager reports and updates.
All right, so I'm going to start with a couple PSAs. Taxes are due May 3rd. I'll repeat myself. Taxes are due May 3rd. The Board of Selectmen scholarships applications, we've sent that out, and those applications are due this Friday from the seniors that live here in town. So I would suspect probably April 27th or thereabouts, we'd be reviewing those scholarship applications. The library will hold their book sale on May 1st. That will take place on the 6th Main Street lot, and they will use the corner lot of the Norton Lestine property. And then they're hopeful that they'll have a successful book sale, and then they can remove the container, which is located at Zero Grove Street, the old Thompson gravel lot property. So I did speak to Mr. Thompson today. He also plans over the next week or so to remove his container. So I would suspect no later than the first week of May, both of those containers will be removed, and we can decide what we want to do as far as lumen seating, so on and so forth. Just to note, the EDC voted last night to endorse the community center. The DPW is hard at work, as you can imagine, right now. They've got the fields ready, and I've heard a lot of positive feedback from all the fields. Practices started this past weekend at a number of fields. The gate opening program has started, where the DPW opens the gates in the morning, and then the PD will close those gates at Kiwanis Beach and all of our other parks, such as Heritage Park, for example. And then the benches, you should see those. Those are out. Those have been put at the town common and at the library. The porta-john has been put out over at the playground, and then, as you can imagine, there's a number of areas that get beat up because of the salt and sand. The DPW is already working on and hopes to complete the looming and seeding they do in the spring by the end of this week. Our first mill and overlay will begin next week, and that'll be on Ridge Road. They will be using funds that were left over from last year's article. I will be sure to pass along to Mr. Westgate that the board's action this evening relative to the roads article. He planned on going out to bid, so we're going to have to pull that back. The hydrant flushing program has also began. You'll see signboards throughout town notifying which neighborhoods will experience probably some turbidity in the water due to the hydrant flushing program. So again, DPW is hard at work during the early part of the spring. The Board of Health continues to work with the towns of Uxbridge and Northbridge and Sutton to hold their weekly clinics in Uxbridge and in Nipmock. Right now they're vaccinating upwards of 500 people per day at the Uxbridge and Nipmuck site. As an aside, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, you may have heard, has been suspended by the FDA due to blood clots. So we're expecting to see a reduced number of folks being vaccinated, given the fact that they're holding back the J&J vaccine. And then last, I just wanted to mention that the vast majority of our employees have been given the opportunity to get vaccinated. I would suspect that the last ones will be vaccinated in early May, plus a 14-day period in which the vaccine immunity needs to build would lead us to right around the third week of May. So at that point, unless I hear otherwise, it's my intention to reopen all buildings effective June 1st to the public. We would still plan on wearing face masks, practice social distancing, use the plexiglass at all of our customer service windows, and practice all other protective measures. But I feel at that point that folks have been vaccinated and we can employ those protective measures. It's now, in my opinion, time to reopen our buildings to the public. But again, that's open for your discussion. If you feel otherwise, I'm happy to continue to maintain the current posture that we have. Pending any questions, that's all I have.
Thank you. It's great. It's good to have everything opening up again, including the parks and the buildings and all that. I think we all look forward to that, and having the gravel lot cleaned up and move the containers. I think those are all good, positive things. So appreciate that. Maureen, Steve, what questions do you have?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing for me either.
All right. Very good. Any other closing comments?
Sure, I'd like to make one or two. I think that we need to circle back, meet with either the school committee or superintendent, business agent, somebody, and try to get some answers to some of these questions that we have. Maureen has asked it numerous times and nobody has the answer as far as ESSER funding. You know, we need to get to the bottom of what's going on here. We need to find out why there's no cooperation between the subcommittee and the school committee. You know, frankly, we start the budget process in December. You know, why? So we can modify it 8 times between now and then. You know, we could start in September or we could start it in May. You know, it seems like we're going to end up at the same spot. So again, I think we need to have them come down, as they should, report to us, and let's get a better understanding of what's going on and get some answers to our questions. There's an awful lot of money that's gone into that district since last year. Don't forget about the $413,000 for electronic devices that we took out of our kit. Well, $213 for us, $200 for Mendon. But I think we should be afforded some answers so that when we're out in the community and people ask questions, we can't answer them. We're the highest elected officials that people in this town have, and we can't answer a question about the school committee. or the school budget. So poor on my part, frankly, poor on the board. But again, that's just me.
Thank you, Maureen.
I'm all set. Steve has said it.
Couldn't agree more. All right, I will take a motion.
One other thing, actually, I forgot about mentioning. The other question is, where are we with the union contracts? The school has been in supposedly constant negotiation. Are those contracts settled? A week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I listened in. Dr. Maruschek claimed we're still in negotiation. How can we be 18 months in negotiations with 4 unions? So you'll have overrides every year. Don't worry about that.
Steve, if I can.
This is just closing comments by the board. Paul,
Paul, I don't want your answer. I want their answer. Thank you.
No, what I'm saying is the additional funding for the union contracts is built into this budget already. It has to be, because once they can't come back at a subsequent time to get additional money.
Union contract signed as of last year, not 15, 18 months later. This started in November of 2019. So I don't know how many months that is.
Well, to that too, that they also got, without negotiating or informing the town, a 5% raise 6 months in and a % raise at July 1st. And I know that put them down a lot of money. I mean, no contract had been negotiated. I wouldn't have negotiated a contract like that. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, there's clearly an opportunity here to create a closer working relationship encourage a closer working relationship between the various elements of the school management and leadership in the district and the local government and the municipal governments. And I think that that's something we can all strive to work on. The unfortunate news is we're put in the position that we've been put in to have to take the actions we've taken, which are necessary for where we are in the process. And unlike the timeframes we were afforded by the school district, we're giving them 1 year notice that they are going to have to find this money next year. And that we will remember that that's the conversation we've had, and it won't be a surprise. So I think that that's an important thing to do with partners, and when you're working on a team and being collaborative, is giving people clarity and transparency to what your process is. So I think that we've taken the initiative, we've taken the leadership role to do just that, and hopefully that action and planning will be reciprocated. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Maureen. I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second the motion.
Oh, wait a minute. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion. Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous
Good
action.
evening, everyone, and thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.